the fashion industry is massively complicated and hugely difficult to kind of get your head around, which can feel very overwhelming as a consumer. So a bra is always a really good example of a garment that has lots of different stages to it. So if you think about a bra, it has wire in it, like where's the wire come from? Someone's made it, who made it? It has cotton or some sort of material, so where's that come from? Where was it dyed? How has it traveled across the planet? Like all of those things. And that's just like one little garment. So if you think about all the things you own and how many different points they would have touched on that journey, it's quite difficult for us to kind of fully know what's going on. And it's not helped by the fact that really big fashion brands very often kind of wash their hands of what's going on, or they contract things out to places like Bangladesh and Cambodia. And then like, so if we take the Uyghur people as for an example, so for a bit of context, that's in Xinjiang in China, where it's been reported that there seems to be detention centres of people, and they are producing huge amounts of cotton. And it's been predicted that that cotton is in 1 out of 5 cotton garments in the world. So if you think about how many clothes you have in your wardrobe, there's absolutely cotton garments in your wardrobe right now that have been sourced from that region, which, I mean, it looks kind of like forced labour, like bonded labour. So that's just like a tiny example of like a tiny part of the chain that has a huge impact across the whole world. So that can feel totally overwhelming. And obviously there's huge amount of human rights abuses both there and also as a consequence of coronavirus. So the fashion industry is sort of washing their hands of paying for their orders. So it's predicted that £2.5 billion worth of orders were just like cancelled because a lot of big brands pay for their orders after they've got the clothes. So these factories that were producing suddenly don't have any cash flow, they don't have any money because these companies have just said, we're not going to pay. So those sorts of behaviours, because the brands have a lot of power, they can kind of throw their weight around and just say, oh, I'm not going to pay, that's that. And it's very difficult. And so there's all these sort of worker issues which are hugely problematic, but there's also waste, and the environment is a huge thing facing the fashion industry. So in the UK alone, we throw away 350,000 tonnes of clothes every year. And when you think about the fact that it takes about 200 years for one polyester dress to decompose, like those clothes aren't disappearing anytime fast, they're just going to sit somewhere. So it's like, where are they going to go? And the more we do that, the more that stuff's just going to stack up, which is a big problem. And the fact that it's something like the carbon emissions from the fashion industry are worse than the sort of shipping and aviation industries combined. And often we think aeroplanes are really bad, and they're not great, but the fashion industry has a huge part to play in that. So there's just so many parts of the fashion industry that are really problematic when buying from like massive brands on the high street. And we have to take responsibility for that, in that we've become so normal. It's become so normalized to be buying loads of stuff really fast. So we actually wear about 40% of what's in our wardrobes. And we also, it's something like, I think it's about half of fast fashion purchases will be thrown away within a year. So we've just got so used to being able to see things as almost disposable. So we've kind of got this mindset that like we need new stuff all the time. So we're kind of like feeding this massive machine that is all these like big brands like buying stuff. Not even in other countries. I mean, we've seen recently in Leicester where Boohoo are using factories that are, you know, paying apparently £3.50 an hour, which is less than minimum wage. So we have a part to play in that system.
So Stitched Up is a not-for-profit organisation, and we exist to inspire people to take practical action on sustainable fashion. So we run what we describe as a sustainable clothing hub here in Manchester, and that is basically a place where people can come to learn new skills, to swap their clothes, to learn to make, mend and upcycle them. And we also run a repair cafe once a month as well as occasional events that are based around raising awareness of the issues surrounding the fast fashion industry.
So I've been studying various different areas of fashion since I was 13, so mostly starts as a hobby, but then all the way to uni. And then when I graduated uni, I started working in a sort of typical fast fashion brand in Manchester, in Cheetham Hill, sort of rag trade area. And yeah, didn't enjoy it. I'd already started to think a bit about sustainability and stuff, but not massively at that point. And then so yeah, I wasn't enjoying it. So I actually started volunteering here at Stitched Up.
I just have always done sewing and sort of started chopping up charity shop clothes when I was about 10, 11, inspired by my grandma, who was an amazing seamstress and used to make the clothes for my whole family. I just kind of started to find out about the issues, I suppose, and realise what was the impact of the industry as a whole, and being quite a shopaholic in my very early teens. And yeah, I quite soon realised my parents work in sustainable food, so then it didn't take much for me to be like, oh, hang on a minute, what am I spending my money on here? What am I investing in?
We're a social enterprise, we're a community interest company, and we're based in Plymouth in the old Jaeger clothing factory, and we're trying really hard to reignite manufacturing here in the city. It used to be massive in the 70s and 80s, and there are very few businesses now, and there are also very few skilled workers in the southwest anymore. So we've set up a commercial sampling studio where we make small production runs and do product development for brands and designers, some new and some quite well established. And then alongside that, we have a training unit where we're ABC award accredited to deliver level 1 and level 2 short courses in industrial manufacturing, and level 2 and level 3 fashion and textile apprenticeships. So I suppose ultimately I'm a bit of a nerd and fascinated with the engineering of stuff. So and like you guys, I'm probably more of a knitter than a sewer, so I was a knitter when I was little. But I messed up my A-levels. There's always more than one way to get to where you want to go ultimately. Completely messed up my A-levels. So I went and did a BTEC. I went to Manchester Metropolitan Uni and I did a 2-year BTEC in clothing design and technology, which taught me all the basics of everything: how to pattern cut, how to sew, how to take a machine apart and put it back together again, all that kind of nerdy business stuff. A massive chunk about textiles, so I learned about fabrics and fibres and stuff like that, and I loved it. And then I transferred to the last year of a degree, but my degree wasn't a fashion degree, it was a BSc in product engineering and robotics and things like that. So I learned about factory systems and lean manufacturing. So I landed a trainee garment technologist job at Topshop's head office, and I stayed there for about 10 years, and I became a jeans expert. Of course, it meant that I had the opportunity to travel all over the world, to go to the mills, to check the factories out, and I think that's where I first started getting an interest in things to do with social compliance. And then throughout my career I've kind of shifted Gap and M&S, and I spent quite a few years at ASOS, and I set up a women's wear brand called Finery with some of my friends. Then I moved here back to Devon, which is where I'm from, and I decided that I was losing a little bit of love for all the graduates that I was seeing coming out of fashion college. That I know a controversial thing to say, but what I was noticing was that they were all very, very academic, and they had very, very little practical skill. They couldn't sew and they couldn't pattern cut. So I decided to do all my teaching qualifications. So I did my PGCE and I taught on the fashion degree at South Devon College whilst I did it, because I just wanted to understand what a curriculum looks like and how people learn, and how can I teach people to sew the way that I learned in my BTEC, because it was just amazing. And I am all about skills, and I just noticed a massive lack of it. And it was while I was doing doing my PGCE actually that I followed Plymouth College of Art anyway, and I saw their job post for someone to come to Makers HQ and basically set it up. And it's everything that I love. It's academia, it's engineering, it's people, and it's, you know, it's just all those lovely like touchy-feely things that after working in fast fashion for ages, which is quite soulless and can be quite nasty and cutthroat, it just felt right as I'm moving towards my 50s that it should be something I was involved in. So, you know, I applied, and I think I would have killed someone for the job, but fortunately I got it, and I've been there for about 2.5 years now, so it's still very young.
I think someone else asked me this recently, and I think, and like you say, it seems like such a big thing, so you can be kind of like overwhelmed with how much you need to do for it. But even just by making small changes and seeing how accessible it can be, because like a lot of the time when I first started like looking into wanting to make my own like wardrobe sustainable, I was just straight away was like, well, I buy new clothes from ethical brands, which are of course quite expensive, one being the niche, and also that's just what it costs. So it's like showing that it is an accessible thing. So yeah, but either like upcycling stuff for the charity shop, we run like swap shops as well, and all you need to do is to pay an entry fee for that, and you can like go home with like 10 new to you items and things like that. So
yeah, I think like the keeping your current clothes in use for longer is like the biggest impact thing you can do, basically, and you don't have to do anything, you just sit at home and you're already doing it. So RAP have done some research into this, the Waste and Resources Action Programme, and they say that by keeping a garment in active use for another 9 months, you reduce its water, waste and carbon footprints by about 20 to 30%. So it's like significant, you know, if you keep something another 3 years, that's huge. So having the skills to make your own quality garments, or even just repair things to keep them for longer, is definitely really the easiest and most impactful thing that you can do.
I think there's a couple of things. People just need to buy better. They just need to be more considered in their approach. And, you know, whether they have very, very little disposable income or whether they have lots of money, you can educate yourself to buy better. I mean, look what's happened with Boohoo over the last month or so. You know, it was obvious that any company selling dresses, brand new dresses for £6 made in the UK, is not going to be a nice place to work, and there's going to be some sort of compromise down the back end with regards to people's human rights. And I think if we all educated ourselves a little bit more, you know, read up about the brands that we're buying from, you know, sign up to newsletters like Labour Behind the Label, and just save up actually, and just spend a bit more money on stuff that's made better. Because exactly like you said, Brian, if you hold on to a garment and you hold on to it for longer, it has such an amazing impact with regards to, you know, just buying something, wearing it on Saturday night and chucking it away. But it's very, very difficult to do that if the clothes that you're buying are rubbish in the first place.
It's good for individuals who are able to spend the time learning about where their clothes come from and stuff, mending them and things, but not everybody can do that. So also I think it's using our voice as citizens is hugely important to push companies, and just to say to them, because ultimately, you know, if I wear my t-shirt for 5 years, that's nice, but it's not going to change the industry as a whole. If that's what we're talking about, then there has to be an element of pushing policymakers, pushing companies for changes, because it has to be at that level, else nothing is going to change. So like, you know, I think we started up Stitched Up because we wanted to not feel powerless in this, like we mentioned earlier, the sort of global nature of this industry and the impacts that it has, and so we just didn't know quite how we could make a change. So we feel really passionately both about the community up stuff, but also about, you know, the community pushing for stuff on a national and international level, pushing for legislation basically that is going to force something to change.
that's a really easy question for me, actually, because what I see with people coming to us to set up brands is that sustainable fashion for them means the raw materials that things are made from, and the ethics of how things are made doesn't even cross their minds. So we have so many conversations with brands about organic fabrics, about Tencel, about buttons made out of recycled plastic and fabrics out of recycled fishing nets and all of that sort of stuff, and they're always very keen to put a huge amount of investment and kind of almost chuck all the cost price money at those sorts of things. But then when you talk to them about how much it costs to actually manufacture something ethically in a factory that has really good health and safety, that pays at least the living wage, not the minimum wage, that has decent working hours, you know, all that sort of stuff, that doesn't cross their radar at the moment. So we seem to spend a lot of time trying to educate people. And I say to people, whenever they come to us for a quote, I always say to them, you know, the first thing I need to tell you is that A, we're a UK manufacturer, B, we're a not-for-profit social enterprise, and C, everybody's paid at least the living wage. So we are not going to be cheap. You know, you're not going to get a dress for £6. It's more likely going to be 26 quid by the time we make it. And I think it does come as a bit of a shock often.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to hear that people are focused on the environmental side, because that's something that I had. It kind of comes across when you see people talking on social media about sustainability, that it's all about, people are really into like, oh, pineapple leather, or, you know, stuff like this, these kind of innovations that are important, but really there's a whole, and I think, you know, post the most recent Boohoo expose, it's hard to pretend that those social issues aren't important and aren't a huge factor in the fashion industry. I think my kind of what you wish people knew about sustainable fashion, I think, is also kind of related to cost, but in terms of lots of people say, oh, I can't afford sustainable fashion, and I like to say to them, like I've been obsessed with sustainable fashion since I was about 12, and I've probably spent about £200 on clothes in the last 15 years of my life, because I just swap everything, I buy everything, I occasionally buy things from charity shops. Can't remember the last time I bought a new item of clothing, so it doesn't have to be expensive, although I know that, you know, being able to shop in charity shops, you know, comes from a position of relative privilege as well. But yeah, there are cheaper, cheap low-cost solutions, so it doesn't have to be a pricey thing.
Yeah, and I do also feel like it's back to that education aspect of like, sort of, I know that I've had discussions with lots of people in the past where it's like, well, you can just go to the charity shop, or you can just swap it and things like that. And some people do want that brand new thing to make them sort of, you know, that they've earned for and all that kind of things. And it's like, they are out there, but like you say, you just have to save a bit more, but also taking away the stigma from going, well, it's not brand new to a certain extent, it's from a charity shop, but it is brand new to you, and things like that. So it's still got value. You're not wearing tat, is what a lot of people think for charity shops and swaps and things like that. And it's like, well, it's not. It's got value. It's going to make you happy.
Today I'm going to be reworking this tired old men's shirt into a tie shoulder top for summer. So you can see here why this shirt is basically beyond its life in its current form as a shirt. It's got some armpit stains, it's got a bit of ink spots on the sleeve there, and also on the upper back there's a few marks. I don't know if you can see those. So basically, yeah, it's done its job as a shirt, and now if it's going to continue as a garment, we need to make it into something else. We're going to use the bottom half of the shirt as the bodice, so from the armpits down. That's going to be, we're just going to do a sort of bandeau boob tube style top. So the first thing to do is just do a straight line right across, just under the arms, and then cut that off.
Okay, so having now tried on my shirt, the bodice part that we've got left, I was gonna leave the shaped hem at the bottom, but I've decided I am gonna get rid of that. So I'm just gonna draw a straight line straight across. And then I'm gonna cut that. And then with both the top and the bottom of the shirt, I'm going to do a double fold hem. So I'm going to do the first one of about 1/2 centimetre or so, and then about the same again for the next one. And then I'm going to stitch all the way around both the top and the bottom of the shirt with a straight stitch. Okay, so this is what our shirt is looking like now that it's been hemmed at the top and the bottom. And the next thing that we're going to do, I've tried it on, and I'm going to run a channel all around the top, about 3 centimetres down from the top edge. And through that channel, I'm going to put a piece of elastic that's going to gather it around the top of the bust. So I'm just going to turn the shirt inside out. And then with my chalk and a ruler, I'm just going to measure and just mark my 3 centimetres all the way around the top edge of the shirt. Okay, and then I'm going to take my bias binding, and I'm just going to get a piece that is long enough to go all the way around the shirt. So plus just add a little bit extra for luck, and also we want to tuck it under at the ends as well. So I'm just folding that over at the end, which will finish the edges off, and then line the top edge of the bias binding with the marks that I've made, the 3 centimetres mark, and then I'm going to just pin that into place. So now I'm over at my sewing machine. What I'm going to do is stitch as close as I can to the top edge and to the bottom edge. So we're going to go all the way around with 2 rows of stitching, and then by the end we'll have a channel that will thread the elastic through. So as I'm getting to this end, I'm just going to snip off the excess, because I know that I've got enough bias binding here, and I'm just going to cut it down to size and then just fold the end under to finish it off nicely. So now I have taken a safety pin and attached it to one end of the elastic, and then I've just threaded it all the way through the channel at the top. And once I've got all the way through, I've then cut the elastic off from the reel, and I've left it extra long there and just pinned it into place with a pin on that end and with a safety pin on this end. And the idea behind that is that I can then try the top on, check how tight I want the elastic to be, and then once I've decided that, I will finish these ends off properly. Okay, so I'm just trying the top on again. So the elastic is, my necklaces are getting in the way a bit, but the elastic is basically holding it up here. We will come to the fastening bit later. So I've brought some pins, and just trying the top on, I'm going to pin where we want the next rows of elastic to going to be. So we're going to add in a few rows, maybe 2 or 3 rows of shearing. So that's elasticated stitching that gathers in the top. So I'm going to go under the bust, and I think I'm going to go for about here. I'm thinking if we have it gathering to about here, and then this bit will kind of have a little bit of a frill going on. So if I mark another pin there, so I think we could do 3 rows of elasticated stitching there just to gather it in at this point. So now we've got the top with the 3 pins marking where we're going to be doing our elasticated stitching or shirring. So what we need to do now is just draw some guidelines, because we just need something to follow when we're doing the stitching. So I'm just going to measure up from the bottom, and my top pin, the first line of shirring, is 14 centimetres up from the bottom. So I'm doing this marking on the right side of the shirt, so like the outside of the top, because that is the side that we're going to be stitching from. So just be aware of that when you're marking. Use something that's going to come off. I'm using this blue tailor's chalk that, yeah, does show up really well, but in theory should come out in the wash. So, but I'm still just doing it fairly faintly so it doesn't, you know, just in case. So then once you've drawn all those marks on, then you just need to connect all the dots with a straight line to follow. Okay, so now I'm going to take my shirring elastic and a bobbin, and what you have to do is hand wind the elastic onto the bobbin. So be patient with this. We'd recommend, if you've not done shirring before, just have a look at a tutorial which can show you how it basically works. You want to not have much tension on the elastic. You want it to be able to stretch out when it's sewing onto your fabric. So there's the bobbin that we've just wound. Just going to pop it into the bobbin case and then into the machine, and then pick up the bottom thread as normal. Just pull quite a long tail. We're going to put the machine on a long straight stitch, and we're going to up the tension a little bit to, I'll put it on 6.5, but yeah, just something a little bit higher than you would probably normally use for this kind of fabric. And I would highly recommend that you do a sample piece like I've done on a scrap of the shirt, just to check that it's all working fine before you go for it with your main garment. So I'm working on the right side of the shirt, and I'm just going to start with a stitch length of 0 and then do a couple of stitches instead of a back tack, and then I'm just going to stitch all the way down. And I've found with this machine and this fabric that it gathers much more if I go really slowly, so I'm just going to take it nice and steady. Here I've got the sleeve of the shirt, and I'm just going to snip the cuff off, and we're going to have a look, open up the sleeve just so we can see how much fabric we've got, because the sleeve is what we're going to use to create the shoulder ties for the top. So just snip all the way down to open up, all down the underarm seam, just to open up the sleeve. And the same around the armhole. Okay, so we've got our sleeve here that we've cut off, and we've got around 21 centimetres here in this section of the sleeve. So what we want to do, I reckon, we'll make each strip 5 centimetres wide or 2 inches, and then we'll be able to cut 4 of those out of this piece of the sleeve. We need to try and keep our pieces as long as possible, and what we're going to need is 4 strips for each side of the top. So in total we're going to need 8 strips. So I've got all the straps here, and what I'm going to do is with them, I've put them in pairs, and I'm just going to cut across the corner just to give the ends of the straps a bit of shape, and I'm just going to use the ones that I've cut as a template for the others. And this just means that the ends of the straps won't be kind of square and bulky. The next thing is I've got them in my pairs, and I'm going to stitch from one straight side all the way along across the end and back up again. And I'm going to do this with the smallest seam allowance that I can, so as close to the raw edges as you can, because we want to keep the straps as wide as we possibly can. So now we're going to turn the straps inside out, and I've just cut across the corner there so that we can get a nice sharp point. Then I'm basically just going to start turning it inside out and just push all of the strap inside itself. And then you can use the knitting needle to help with this. And I just kind of stand it on the table like that, or then you can just, after a bit, you should just be able to push it through. And I'm using the blunt end of the knitting needle so that I don't poke a hole in it. Then when you get to the pointed ends, I'm going to use the sharp end of the knitting needle, but I'm just going to be really careful. Okay, and then we'll go and give it a press. And then that's what they look like once we've given them a press. Now I'm just pinning on my straps just to check the positioning of them. Once I've done that, I'm just going to stitch across twice, and then we'll be done. Okay, so now I'm at the machine with my straps pinned into place, and the first thing that I'm going to do is just trim off, neaten these edges and finish them off with a zigzag stitch. And so for this I'm using quite a wide but a short zigzag stitch, and I'm going to go just off the edge of the fabric with my stitch. So there we go. It doesn't necessarily look the neatest ever, but it will stop much of the fraying. So now we can attach the straps onto the bodice, and we're just going to use a straight stitch, and we don't want to stitch through any of my elastic, so I'm going to try and stitch either side just above and below where my channel is. So I'm just going to follow the stitch lines on the outside of the garment. So I've tried the top on, and when it's buttoned up, it does, because the button is just a little bit lower than where the elastic is, it's just gaping open a little bit. So I'm just going to add a little hook and eye to hold it closed. So here she is. I think it's a really great way to, salvage something that was basically going to end up in the recycling otherwise. With this upcycle, we've managed to cut off all the bits that were damaged and come up with something totally new.
these little moments of amazingness, and they come when you least expect it. You know, it's that making a difference. Oh my God, I've actually made a difference to somebody today. We did 2 sessions with First Stonehouse Scouts, and they needed to get their craft badge. So we were like, come in 2 evenings and we'll help you. We'll do something Christmassy. So it was probably a group of about 15, nearly all boys, mostly around sort of 15, 16, you know, giving it all, doing the dab and all that nonsense and talking about Fortnite and what have you. And we were like, right, we're going to make some Christmas stockings. Here's a template, a massive weight for stocking. You're going to do a design, then you're going to cut it out. Then we're going to teach you to hand sew bits, and then we're going to teach you how to use a domestic, I think it was a domestic machine, and we're going to sew all the way around the outside. And they were like, and I remember the first session that we had, which was about 3 hours, when they left, me and all the staff sat around like, oh God, with ears ringing, and the studio was an absolute bomb site. It was chaos, and we just were exhausted, and we thought, oh my God, this is going to be really hard work. I can't believe they've got to come back again next week. But they came back the following week. And I remember at one point, I think I might have been like, I don't know, threading a needle or something. And I looked up and I looked across the studio, and it was silent. And there were about 15, 16 teenage lads, all in silence, hand sewing. And I was like that. And it was just this like moment, and I'll never forget it. And I got really, really teary, because I was like, oh my God, we've actually, you know, taken a group of kids who have absolutely no interest in what we do whatsoever, and we've engaged them, even if it was just for 30 seconds. There was a point where they found that they'd actually they'd learned something new, you know, they'd gone out of their comfort zone, and their faces at the end when they had finished what they were doing, you know, I don't think there's anything that can quite replace that feeling of pride that you have when you actually make something with your hands. You know, it was just, and moments like that for me are enough, you know. When Makers HQ is a very, very hard company to manage, because, you know, social enterprises are very, very difficult to work in, because not only have you got to like pay the bills, but you've got to tick all these boxes in terms of people as well, because that's really why you're there, you know. And there are nights where it's so stressful and I don't sleep and I worry, and you know, but I reflect and I think about that moment with the Scouts, or that moment when that young girl tried on a prom dress and it was a tenner and her mum could afford it and her face was just amazing. It's things like that having worked for Philip Green for 10 years and etc., you know, it just makes me feel really, really grateful for the position that I'm in, and makes me, I don't think ever want to work outside of community business again, because it's all that emotive stuff. You know, there are really amazing times. I'm sure you guys have similar moments where you all get a bit teary.
Definitely.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I suppose like examples is that we run like a learn to sew course, which was like a 3-week course where you'd come in and you'd make you do a little L plate, because you were like learning how to use your sewing machine, and then you make a cushion cover with a buttonhole, and then a pencil case with a zip in it. And yeah, like a lot of people, especially with the pencil case one, because it's got the lining and it's got the fancy way of turning it out, there's a lot of people that just don't believe that they can make something like that. And then when they do, I remember just people being like, oh, I did this, and it's like, that's really nice. And then also, especially with the Be Well project that I mentioned with the Crafternoons and stuff, the one I ran was based in Gorton, so going around and delivering, so which is like East Manchester, and I'm based in South Manchester, and then going around there delivering the packs and things like that. And I remember one person hadn't actually made it to the physical Crafternoons when we were based at Gorton Monastery, but I managed to get her back involved when we started delivering the packs. And yeah, like just how they felt because of that. And I remember like I got a bit of cheesecake off a brother as well, and like cycling home being like, I love my job, like this is great. Like, and it's that impact that you can have. And it's also because this isn't something I'd originally planned to do, especially in the sort of way of teaching. I think I'd originally been like, I don't ever want to be a teacher sort of thing, and I know it's like a different kind of teaching, but yeah, it's nice to know that I've helped like someone think that they can do something, and that they've trusted me, and then like they've got a pencil case out of it and they actually love it, and they've already got plans of what they're going to do with it. It's not just like I've made something, throw it away. Like they're going to do something with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we're really lucky, aren't we, in our jobs, that we get to have those kind of moments that like you guys have both described just every week basically. We do a lot of work partnering with local charities and working with people, because it's important to us that the activities that we offer in sustainable clothing is not something that is just for like the middle class or whatever, you know. It's something that is important for everyone, and even more important if you're on a low income, because then you can repair your clothes yourself and save yourself some money. So yeah, I work with the Booth Centre, which is a charity that supports people with experience of homelessness, and I do a sewing session there. And every week I have a moment like that, you know, where there's someone who's just like, often the best ones are often when people come over and ask me to fix something that they have, like, oh, will you fix my trousers? And I'm like, I'm going to show you how to fix your trousers. And it always, you know, meets with resistance, but when you persevere, there was one guy, he was just so pleased with himself. I basically spent 30 minutes forcing him to repair his own trousers, and at the end I could see him going around the room showing everyone what he'd done with his trousers. It's so lovely. So yeah, I feel very fortunate for that.